Da hao, my name is Dean, and I am an Aussie in Taiwan. Thank you for your support so far. I appreciate it. Now, this week's vlog, I'm going to take a break from the current situation at the moment, as I'm sure you're all sick of hearing about it. I've decided to talk to you about the cost of living in Taiwan as compared to Australia. Groceries in general are cheaper in Taiwan as compared to in Australia. Most basic things like flour, etc. are cheap. Certain fruit and vegetables are cheaper. That of course depends on the season. Now as for meat, it's a bit different here. Pork is the cheapest meat, and also chicken is quite good as well. Mainly because Taiwan doesn't have a beef industry, so therefore beef is definitely more pricier than in Australia. And also seafood, depending on quality of course, is comparatively expensive as well. But compared to the cost of living, I think it's not too bad. The best place to buy groceries if you are in Taiwan are your cheap supermarkets like Trenlian, or in English which is PX Mart. Carrefour is great if you want to get imported stuff as well. And also Welcome has some pretty cheap groceries as well. Don't forget 7-Eleven, although it's the most expensive when it comes to buying things, it's just really convenient to go to 7-Elevens, as they are everywhere in Taiwan. Now, I love taking public transport in Taiwan. It is really cheap, especially compared to Australia and some other countries as well. The cheapest are definitely the buses. It costs 15 NT for one zone, and that one zone can stretch a fair bit of distance. The MRTs are really cheap as well. Of course, the longer you travel, the more expensive it is. And also the local trains, the Taiwan Railway, are quite cheap as well. And then you have the high-speed rail. Although it is the most expensive form of transportation, it still is very valuable because of the time you save traveling. Taxis are really cheap here. Of course, they cost more than other modes of transportation, but compared to most countries, they are really cheap. Like, it costs about 150 NT for about a 10 to 15 minute taxi ride, which I think it's really good. And also it is really handy if you need to get to places in an emergency. Now, dining is really cheap in Taiwan if you don't feel like cooking or if it's not convenient to cook. There are many small businesses that do basic dishes such as lunchboxes, noodles, rice. Most of these prices are under 100 NT. If you want to go somewhere a bit nicer, you do spend a little bit more money, but that can be quite valuable as well. Now, if you want to eat different kinds of cuisine, you're looking at prices between 200 to 500 NT. They have an array of Japanese restaurants. Even Italian is popular here, with places like Caesarea, which is the cheapest place to go if you like Italian. And of course, many small businesses operate at those prices. If you really are looking for comfort food, like Western-style restaurants, they are pretty pricey, but compared to the cost of living in Western countries, it's about on par. And then of course, you've got your high-end restaurants as well. So dining in Taiwan is cheap, depending on what you feel like. And also, night markets are great for quick and cheap snacks. Rent is crazy cheap in Taiwan. The one thing you'll have to get used to is that you pay rent monthly as opposed to weekly. Now, the good news about this is, like, compared to rent in Australia, it costs the same amount of money to rent an apartment for a month than it is for a week. If you're a person living on your own, the cheapest price for rent is about 8,000 or so NT for a basic studio. Of course, if you want bigger space, you do have to pay more. Or if you want a multi-room apartment, they can range from 10,000 to 20,000 NT a month, depending on where you live as well. The most expensive place to live in Taiwan is, of course, Taipei. and some parts of New Taipei City. The further you go out, like into the more remote places, the cheaper the rent is. Clothes can be quite cheap if you're not picky about style or quality. Taiwan does have a lot of chain clothes stores that are popular around the world, such places such as Uniqlo and H&M. I believe they're about on par as in regards to price ranges. Of course, if you want nicer clothes, you do have to spend a bit more money. Electricity is very cheap in Taiwan as it is government owned. Even better if the landlord lets you pay your own electricity bills. Usually depending on how much power you use, bills can range from about as low as 200 NT a month till about 1000 NT. Water is really cheap as well. When I was living in Keelong, I had to pay my own water utility bills, and they worked out to be quite cheap. This was 8 years ago, and back then it was roughly about 300 NT every 2 months. That's definitely cheap compared to some countries where water is privatized and therefore a lot more expensive. The best thing about cost of living in Taiwan is the healthcare costs. First of all, Taiwan has a system called National Health Insurance that your employer helps you pay each month, and you can go to the doctor for only 100 NT. Even going to the dentist is the same price as well. And also buying medicines is pretty cheap as well. It is incredible how little it costs to see a doctor. This is where living in Taiwan is one of my favorite things because of the low cost of living with health. If you want to find out more about what it's like to live in Taiwan, or if you have any suggestions about what content would you like, I could even provide some details about learning Chinese, or I could even teach you some English. Please give this video a like, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. My name is Dean, and I am an Aussie in Taiwan. 再见.